I used to believe in fairy tales. My life seemed like one, at least on the surface. I had the perfect marriage, or so it seemed. I had found the man I thought I would grow old with, Alex. He was everything I had ever wanted, charming, kind, and caring. He had a way of making me feel like I was the center of his universe. We laughed together, shared our dreams, and talked about the future as if nothing could ever tear us apart. But there was also my sister, Maya. She and I were always close. We shared everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We were best friends before we were sisters. Our bond was unbreakable. Or at least that's what I thought. The first cracks in the foundation appeared subtly. At first, I thought it was just me being paranoid. Maybe it was my insecurities creeping in, or maybe the stress of work was affecting me more than I realized. But then I started noticing little things. Alex was a little too distant lately. He'd come home late from work more often. His phone was always face down when I was around, and he didn't seem as eager to make future plans as he once had. And then there was Maya. She seemed different too. She was a bit more secretive, often retreating into her own world, avoiding eye contact with me, and speaking less when we were all together. I told myself it was just a phase, that it would pass, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The warning signs became impossible to ignore when I walked in on them one night. Alex and Maya, my husband and my sister, were together in a way I had never imagined. The betrayal was like a punch to the gut. It was the ultimate betrayal, one that not only shattered the trust one had with Alex, but also obliterated the bond one thought I had with Maya. I could feel my world crumbling around me. How could they? How could my sister and the man I loved do this to me? It wasn't just about the affair, it was about the emotional betrayal that cut deeper than anything physical could. As I stood there, paralyzed by the shock and the overwhelming pain, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. But what could I do? How could I get back at them for everything they had done? It wasn't just revenge I was after. It was justice, and it was time for me to take control of my life and my story. The discovery came like a slow burn, one that started as a mere flicker of doubt and soon turned into an all-consuming fire. It was one of those moments that stays etched in your mind forever. The first time you realized that everything you believed in was a lie. It began with something as insignificant as a text message. It was late one evening, and I was cleaning up the kitchen after dinner when Alex's phone buzzed from the counter. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about it, but for some reason, that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The message was from an unknown number, and when I glanced over, I saw the words, "Can't wait to see you again. Let's make sure no one finds out this time." My heart stopped. The room spun, and for a moment I thought I might collapse. Was I reading this right? Could it be a prank? Maybe I was just overthinking it. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just some random message. The tone, the intimacy, it felt too real to ignore. I tried to convince myself that it was nothing, but the doubt gnawed at me, growing stronger by the minute. Over the next few days, I found myself obsessively checking Alex's phone, which had always been private to me, but now nothing seemed off limits. And that's when I saw it. Texts, calls, and messages that all pointed to one inevitable conclusion. It was clear. My husband was having an affair, and the woman wasn't some stranger. It was Maya. I remember the exact moment when everything came crashing down. I was at home alone, feeling the weight of the truth sink in when my sister called me. Her voice was too casual, almost too normal, but it sounded different, like she was hiding something. And that's when it hit me. How could she sound so unaffected? I hung up abruptly, my hands shaking as I tried to wrap my mind around it. I walked to the living room, feeling the walls closing in. My body felt heavy, and my chest was tight. I had to confront them, had to hear the truth from their own mouths. So I called Alex, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "Alex, we need to talk," I said, barely able to keep my emotions in check. He sounded confused at first, then defensive. "What's going on? You've been acting strange lately. I know about you and Maya," I said, the words tasting bitter as they left my mouth. There was a long silence. I could hear his breathing on the other end, and for a moment I thought he might deny it, try to explain it away. But instead, his voice cracked. I, I didn't mean for it to happen. I never wanted to hurt you, he said, his words trailing off. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room, but I was frozen in place. I had always trusted him. He had always been my rock. And now, he was the one who had shattered everything. How could he? Maya knew about us, he continued, his tone filled with guilt, but there was no denying the responsibility he was avoiding. It just happened. I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal itself or the fact that he was still making excuses for it. I felt sick to my stomach. My whole body was trembling as I tried to digest what he had just admitted. When I hung up, it felt like I had stepped out of my own body. Nothing felt real. I sat down on the couch, the weight of the situation sinking in. How could Maya, the sister I had loved and trusted with my life, betray me in this way? My heart felt like it was being ripped from my chest. I didn't know what to do next. Anger surged through me in waves, but I couldn't decide whether I wanted to hurt them, confront them, or just run away from the world altogether. The trust one had with Alex was shattered. The bond one had with Maya felt broken beyond repair. And in that moment, I was left questioning everything about myself. Was I not enough for Alex? Did I not give Maya the love and support she needed? My sense of identity, who I was as a wife, as a sister, was slipping through my fingers like sand in an hourglass. As the days passed, I tried to talk to Maya, but every time I looked at her, I saw her lying to me. It was in her eyes, the way she would look away or change the subject when I got too close to the truth. The guilt she must have been feeling was palpable, but she never once admitted to it. Instead, she continued to deflect, to pretend like everything was fine, as if she hadn't been a part of the betrayal that destroyed my life. It hurt more than anything I had ever experienced, this double-edged sort of love and pain. I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, but all I could feel was the overwhelming weight of my shattered heart. What was left for me now? At the same time, I couldn't ignore the truth. This was a family issue, and I was at the center of it. My love for both of them conflicted with the growing sense of betrayal that consumed me. How could I ever forgive them? And should I even try? The moment of realization, the moment I understood that I would not allow this betrayal to break me, was the moment I chose to take control. I wasn't going to be the victim in my own story. I wasn't going to let Alex and Maya define who I was, no matter how deep their betrayal had cut. This was about reclaiming my power, my dignity, and my sense of self. I had lived my life in love, trust, and loyalty, and now it was time for me to find a new path, one that would allow me to move forward with strength, even if that meant taking matters into my own hands. I needed closure. I needed justice. I needed to look at them and show them the consequences of their actions. I had always been the type of person who avoided confrontation, who kept the peace. But now all of that had changed. I had been wronged, and it was time for me to rise above it and fight back. I started by digging deeper, not just into Alex's actions, but into Maya's as well. It was almost instinctive, the need to know everything, the need to make sense of how they both could betray me, someone who had always had their backs. At first, I only had pieces of the puzzle, but the more I uncovered, the more disgusted I became with both of them. I began with Alex's phone, going through every message, every call log, and every email that had come through in the past few weeks. The affair was so much worse than I could have ever imagined. There were late-night rendezvous, cryptic messages, and pictures I never wanted to see. But the most chilling discovery was a series of texts that Alex and Maya had exchanged about the future, about how they were planning to meet up again once everything blows over. The casual way they talked about me, how they dismissed my existence as if I were just a minor inconvenience in their affair, made my blood boil. Maya had been lying to me this whole time, pretending to be the loving sister, the confidant, the friend who supported me in every way. Yet behind my back, she had been planning this betrayal, scheming with Alex in the shadows. She had played the part of the innocent, sweet sister who would never hurt me. But that was all a lie. I felt sick to my stomach, but I knew I had to keep going. I couldn't stop now. Each discovery only fueled my anger and gave me a clearer picture of their deceit. They thought they could get away with it, but they were wrong. As I pieced together their lies, I also began to plan. The initial shock of the betrayal was subsiding, replaced with a fierce determination. I would not let them get away with it. I couldn't just confront them. No, I needed something more, a calculated payback that would leave them with no doubt about the consequences of their actions. I started by watching them more closely. I had to know when they would be vulnerable, when I could strike. I used Maya's social media as a tool, tracking her every move, reading between the lines of her posts and comments. She had been so careful, so meticulous, but I found the cracks, small things that betrayed her careful facade. A post about a secret getaway with someone, a photo with a hand on her waist that I recognized all too well. These little details told me everything I needed to know. Maya was still seeing Alex behind my back, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I knew that I had to confront them at the right time. But I also realized that revenge wasn't just about getting back at them. It was about making sure they felt the weight of their actions. The emotional roller coaster that came with each revelation, each new discovery, was intense. There were moments when I felt like I was losing myself in this investigation. Like I was becoming someone I didn't recognize. But the need for justice, for closure, kept pushing me forward. One of the most difficult things I had to navigate was the moral dilemma. Was revenge really going to make me feel better? Would it bring the closure I craved? Or would it make me feel emptier than I already did? The question haunted me, especially when I saw how cold and indifferent Alex had become during our interactions. His guilt wasn't genuine. It was just a shallow attempt to salvage his own conscience. He didn't regret his actions. He regretted getting caught. There were days when I doubted myself, when I felt weak and unsure. But then I would remember their faces, the hurt they had caused me, the lies they had told, the betrayal that had shattered my trust. I couldn't let that stand. I couldn't just let them move on as if nothing had happened. I would make them see that there were consequences for treating people like I was disposable. The deeper I dug, the more I realized how intertwined their lives were. They had been hiding it for so long, and the lengths they had gone to keep this secret were staggering. I began to think of ways to expose them, ways that would make sure everyone knew who they really were. This was not just about me. It was about making sure the truth came to light for my own peace of mind and for the people who deserved to know what kind of people Alex and Maya truly were. It wasn't just about revenge for the sake of revenge. It was about reclaiming my story. It was about showing them that I would not be the victim in this situation. I would take back control of my life, and they would learn that betraying me wasn't something they would ever forget. The tension was mounting. Each day that passed felt like I was closer to the moment when everything would explode. I had my plan, but the question lingered. Was it enough? Was the payback I was planning going to give me the satisfaction I needed? Would it make everything right again? Or would it leave me empty, with nothing more than a broken heart and a trail of destruction in my wake? I didn't know the answer yet, but what I did know was this. It was time for them to feel the consequences of their choices, and I was ready to make that happen. The moment for payback arrived quietly, almost eerily so. I had planned every detail meticulously, making sure that the revenge would hit both Alex and Maya exactly where it would hurt the most. Deep in their pride, their self-image, and the lives they had so carefully built on lies. The method I chose wasn't reckless or violent. It was calculated and precise. One that would expose their betrayal to the people who mattered most, the people who trusted them, and the people who would understand the depth of what they had done. It all began with a carefully timed dinner invitation. I asked Alex and Maya to meet me at my house under the guise of wanting to have a family talk. I knew they'd be hesitant, but they wouldn't refuse me. Not knowing the storm that was about to hit them, they both agreed. I could see the nerves in Maya's eyes when she arrived, but she tried to cover it up with forced smiles as if everything was fine. Alex, too, seemed on edge but played it off with his usual charm. He still didn't know I knew everything. I prepared the meal with an unsettling calm, moving through the motions while my mind raced with anticipation. I had everything ready. The recordings, the photos, the texts, and the damning evidence that would make their betrayal undeniable. This wasn't just about humiliating them. It was about showing them the consequences of their actions. It was about exposing them for the manipulative liars they were, and I knew I couldn't do it half-heartedly. As we sat down to eat, I noticed how uncomfortable they were. Maya couldn't stop fidgeting with her napkin, and Alex kept checking his phone under the table. They were so used to sneaking around, so used to hiding their guilt that even sitting across from me made them uneasy. I waited for the perfect moment, the one where I could tell them I knew. The silence between us was thick, the tension palpable. I finally broke it. "I know about you too," I said, my voice steady, betraying no emotion. Their faces drained of color in unison, and I watched as the realization hit them. Alex stammered, trying to cover up his panic, but the words wouldn't come. Maya's face twisted, her guilt written all over it. "What are you talking about?" Alex said, his voice shaky. "You're being paranoid." I didn't waste any more time. I pulled out my phone, slamming it onto the table. The screen lit up with all the damning evidence. Texts, pictures, and conversations between the two of them. It was like watching their facade crumble in real time. The guilt was so obvious in their eyes that it almost made me feel sick. Almost. "Is this what you wanted?" I asked, my voice now growing louder, the weight of my words sinking in. "Was this worth it? To tear apart a family for your own selfish desires?" Maya, who had always been my rock, didn't even try to defend herself. Instead, she looked down, too ashamed to meet my gaze. Alex, on the other hand, was angry, his face flushed with irritation. But there was something else in his eyes, fear. "I never meant to hurt you," Alex said, his voice tinged with frustration. But I cut him off. "You didn't just hurt me," I snapped. "You hurt us both. You hurt me, Maya. You hurt everything we had. All those years, all that trust, you destroyed it." I could see the cracks in their relationship now. Maya was no longer the cool, collected sister I had known. She was just as broken as Alex, and in that moment, I could see how much guilt weighed on her. She had played this role of being my best friend, my closest ally, while secretly tearing apart the very foundation of my life. Her betrayal was far worse than his. He was the one I had chosen to love. But Maya? She was supposed to be my blood, my confidant. She had taken that away from me, and for that there was no redemption. The evening played out in silence after that, each of us sitting there, the room heavy with the fallout of the truth. I didn't need to scream or lash out. The damage had already been done. Their actions had spoken louder than any words I could ever say. They knew what they had lost: trust, family, respect, and they would never get it back. The aftermath was immediate. After they left my house, I made sure to send the evidence I had gathered to the people who mattered most, our closest friends and family. I didn't do this out of spite. I did it to show the truth. I didn't want to be seen as the fool, the one left behind, while they carried on with their lies. This was the final exposure. No more hiding. No more pretending. The ripple effect was swift. Our mutual friends were shocked, many of them unable to process how deep the betrayal had gone. Some of them confronted Alex and Maya, but they both denied, deflected, and avoided facing the reality of what they had done. It was pathetic, but I didn't care anymore. I had done what I set out to do, and it had shattered their world. But it also shattered mine. As much as I had wanted this revenge, as much as I had sought justice, I couldn't help but feel empty afterward. I had won, but at what cost? I had lost two people I had loved dearly, and in the end, that pain was still raw. Revenge didn't heal the wound, it only exposed it. I spent days reflecting on the aftermath, replaying the confrontation over and over in my mind. And then something shifted within me. I realized that this whole experience, as painful and as destructive as it had also been the catalyst for my own transformation. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my power. I was no longer the person who would allow myself to be trampled on. I wasn't just a victim of their betrayal. I was a survivor, and now I would move forward on my terms. The emotional roller coaster had been intense. There were moments of pure triumph when I saw them squirm, when I saw their guilt written across their faces. But there were also moments of deep sorrow. What I had done wasn't just about payback. It was about learning to let go. to forgive myself for allowing this to happen in the first place. I had to come to terms with the fact that revenge, while sweet in the moment, was not the answer to healing. As the weeks went by, I began to focus more on myself. I worked on rebuilding my sense of self-worth, reconnecting with the people who truly mattered. Slowly, I started to heal, to find my joy again. The scars were still there, but they no longer controlled me. I was stronger, wiser, and more aware of my own value. And Alex, Maya, they would never be the same again. I had seen to that, but I had also seen to something even more important, my own growth. I had taken control of my life, and in doing so, I had taken the first step toward freedom. It's been months now since the confrontation, since the day I laid bare the betrayal that had poisoned my life. I've had time to process the pain, to reflect on the choices I made and the person I have become in the aftermath of it all. When I first set out for revenge, I believed it would be the cure for the aching wound left by Alex and Maya's deceit. I thought that by exposing them, by making them feel the consequences of their actions, I would somehow find peace. But peace didn't come from revenge. It came from something far more profound. Understanding myself, my worth, and my ability to rise above the betrayal. Healing wasn't linear. It didn't happen overnight, and it didn't come easily. But it happened. Slowly. Piece by piece, I rebuilt my sense of self. At first, there was a feeling of emptiness, as though the betrayal had taken something from me that I would never get back. I mourned the relationship I thought I had with Alex, the bond one shared with Maya, and the family I had once believed was unbreakable. It was devastating to accept that those relationships would never be the same, that they had been built on lies, and that nothing I could do would return them to what they were. But I didn't stay there, in the pit of despair, for long. I refused to. I had seen the worst of betrayal, and I had come through it stronger than I ever thought possible. The aftermath of revenge wasn't as sweet as I had imagined. In fact, it was bittersweet. Exposing Alex and Maya hadn't filled the void. It had only shown me how far they had fallen, and how far I had risen in comparison. They were both lost in their guilt and their lies, while I had found something far more valuable, my own strength. The revenge had been the catalyst, the breaking point. But it was the journey afterward that taught me the most about myself. I began to focus on what mattered, my healing, my future, and the people who had stood by me through it all. I spent more time with friends who loved me, with family who supported me, and with myself, rediscovering my passions and goals that had been overshadowed by the toxic relationships that once consumed my life. I realized how much I had neglected myself while trying to keep the peace, while trying to keep Alex and Maya happy. I had lost sight of my own needs, my own dreams, in the pursuit of maintaining a perfect life. That had to change. I wasn't just going to survive this betrayal, I was going to thrive. In the months that followed, I focused on myself like never before. I took up new hobbies, traveled to places I had always wanted to visit, and reconnected with people who had been there for me all along. I strengthened friendships that had faded into the background while I was lost in the fog of betrayal. I made a promise to myself that I would never again let anyone, not even family, make me feel less than I am. I also took the time to understand what true love meant, what it meant to love myself first, before anyone else. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting for someone else to validate my worth. I was enough on my own. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. My value was inherent, not dependent on the opinions of others or the actions of those who had failed me. This was the most empowering realization of all. As for Alex and Maya, their lives didn't magically fall apart after the truth came out, though I had hoped it would. But eventually I stopped caring about their fate. I realized that my peace didn't lie in their downfall. It lay in me learning how to forgive myself for allowing myself to be blind to their deceit for so long. Their actions were their burden to bear, not mine. I had done what I needed to do. The rest was out of my hands. Moving on from the past wasn't just about putting distance between myself and Alex and Maya. It was about reclaiming the life I had put on hold. I didn't need revenge anymore. I needed growth. I needed to learn to trust again. Not necessarily in others, but in myself. I needed to trust that I would make better decisions in the future, that I would never again compromise my own worth for the sake of others. And in time, the pain faded. It didn't disappear, but it became something I could live with, something that no longer controlled me. I had taken back control of my life, and that was the greatest victory of all. In the months that followed, I met new people, people who respected me, who valued me for who I was, not for what I could offer them. Love, real love, found me when I wasn't looking for it. And this time it was different. It wasn't about filling a void. It was about adding something beautiful to my life. It was about finding someone who saw me, who understood me, and who helped me grow even more. But even as I moved forward, the lessons I had learned from the betrayal stayed with me. Trust is fragile. Loyalty is sacred. And most importantly, self-worth is non-negotiable. These lessons became the foundation for my future, guiding every relationship and decision I made. I would never again settle for less than I deserve. I had learned the hard way that betrayal could come from the most unexpected places, but I had also learned how to overcome it, to rise above it, and to use it as fuel to propel myself forward. Looking back, I realized that the greatest revenge wasn't in exposing Alex and Maya. It was in the transformation I underwent. I became someone who could stand tall in the face of pain, who could learn from every hardship, and who could move on with grace and strength. The long-term impact of the betrayal and the revenge was profound. It reshaped my understanding of myself, my relationships, and my place in the world. It taught me that I was worthy of love, of respect, and of happiness, no matter what others had done to me. So if you're reading this, know that you have the power to take back your life, too. If you're dealing with betrayal, don't let it define you. Take your pain and turn it into strength. Don't wait for anyone to apologize or for life to get easier. You are your own hero. You have the right to stand up for yourself, to demand respect, and to walk away from anything that doesn't serve your happiness. Never forget that your worth is not defined by how others treat you. You are enough. And as for me, I'm walking forward, stronger, wiser, and more at peace than I've ever been. The past will always be a part of me, but it no longer controls me. I am free.